Well, hello, everyone. This afternoon, it's from rainy Everett today, and I want to thank folks for participating in the Facebook Live event. Today, we have a panel discussion on Juneteenth regarding the Juneteenth holiday, about its history and its importance. And we've got a great panel panelists here to help us out with that. I'm joined today by Dr. John Fenn, who's the head of research and programs at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. And John is coming to us from Washington, D.C. Also, I have State Representative John Lovick, and John is in, I think are you in Mill Creek today, John?
I am.
Yeah, you're in Mill Creek. And then Lewis Harris is the first vice president of NAACP Snohomish County, and I presume you're coming to us from Mukilteo. Is that about right? That's great. Well, thanks everyone for joining me today and joining all of us. In a few moments, I'm going to invite the panelists to provide some comments and make some remarks, and we'll get into some discussion after that. But I'll just start off with some opening comments, and that is first to recognize the state of Washington. In April, the state legislature overwhelmingly passed, and Governor Inslee signed a bill into a law that makes June 19th or Juneteenth a legal state holiday. So what is Juneteenth? John Fenn will give us a little more detail on that, but Juneteenth marks the date in 1865 when news of the Emancipation Proclamation finally reached enslaved people in the deepest parts of the former Confederacy. And Black Americans have celebrated Juneteenth for generations. But for many of you watching, chances are you didn't learn about Juneteenth growing up, especially if you were not Black, and as I did not learn about it in school. But our state is finally taking long overdue action to commemorate this important milestone date. And now in 2007, our state legislature designated Juneteenth as a day of remembrance. And during the 2021 session, the legislature then took the next step, beginning next year, that Juneteenth will be a legal state holiday. And perhaps John Lovick can tell us all about the machinations that made that happen and how things came together. The city of Everett as well proclaimed Juneteenth a citywide holiday last year. And last July, Everett Mayor Cassie Franklin and I called on Congress to declare Juneteenth a national holiday. It's a day to celebrate the promise of freedom for Black Americans and to focus as well on the work that still needs to be done to attain that dream. And recent events have heightened and brought a heightened urgency to do more now, to address injustice, to address racism, and to address violence in our country. As civil rights heroine Fannie Lou Hamer proclaimed in 1971, nobody's free until everybody's free. So I'm fortunate to have this group of the three expert panelists with me today who will do more of the talking than I will about the history and importance of Juneteenth, the work that went into making it a state holiday, and how this important day is celebrated in local communities. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please enter them in the comments section, and the panelists, we may be able to get some those questions to the panelists later in the broadcast. So as a matter of introduction, I want to now turn to Dr. John Fenn, who is, again, head of programs and research at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. John Fenn.
Thank you very much, Representative Larsen. It's an honor to be here, especially with you, Mr. Harris, and you, Representative Lovick, to sort of just talk about this holiday and the celebration, which, as you've outlined, connects to a specific date in history, June 19th, 1865, when Union General Gordon Granger read aloud the General Order Number 3 from the balcony of the Ashton Villa in Galveston, Texas, that announced that enslaved peoples of Texas were then free. The news of the Emancipation Proclamation hadn't reached that far down, although it was close to 2 years old at that point. And so the news was spreading slowly, and it was spreading through the movement of Union troops through the Deep South. From that day on, I mean, spontaneous celebrations happened that day around Texas and other parts of the South. that then grew into annual celebrations in many communities, many Black American communities, and then have extended on to today. And they're often celebrated with picnics. Homemade strawberry soda is a big feature of it. Traditions have emerged around barbecue, around parades. And that's the kind of stuff that the American Folklife Center is really interested in at the Library of Congress. So we document local traditional culture, folk beliefs, food ways, speech patterns, oral histories, and we do that in order to help people access and understand the fabric of culture in the United States. One of the key things that we have at the American Folklife Center in our significant ethnographic archive, which is probably the largest in the country, we say sometimes the largest in the world, but the British Library sort of contests that, is we have amazing oral history collections that were made between the 1930s and up until the 1970s of formerly enslaved people. So these were people who were in their 80s and 90s who had been born into slavery. And we have 3 or 4 of these interviews where they recollect June 19th, 1865 as very young children. Their memories reach back that far. We have their voices speaking about their memories of that day. It's an incredibly powerful thing to listen to. I've provided some links that you'll be able to get to. The Folklife Center stores these collections. We make them publicly available. The whole collection, called Voices Remembering Slavery, is online. And it's available to everyone to listen to. And these are rich primary sources that help augment a lot of the things we also have at the Library of Congress, including initial drafts of the Emancipation Proclamation. We also have documents and photographs of Black Union soldiers who joined the Union Army after the Emancipation Proclamation and were part of the continuing effort at liberation. And so we have amazing things at the library, and we're here ready to serve the public, ready to serve anyone who wants to know more. The team that I work with at the library, at the American Folklife Center, we do a lot of public programming. We bring experts into talk. We bring musicians into play. We've been running virtual concert series this summer and last summer so that folks around the country and around the world can still partake in traditional culture. We also publish a blog, and the top link here is a link to our blog post that has a capsule history of Juneteenth, as well as links directly to the interviews that I just mentioned, where people are recollecting some 60, 70, even 80 years later, their memories about that day. So I invite you all to draw on the library, draw on these rich resources that we have documenting Juneteenth and the ongoing struggle for equality and civil rights. And I will let go of my time now and move on to the other speakers and hope to come back to a rich conversation.
That's great. Thanks for that introduction to June 19th and, of course, the resources at the Library of Congress. And I want to emphasize for people, it's called the Library of Congress, but you can access, you don't have to be in Congress to access these resources online. You can, as John noted, you can link to these resources at the Library of Congress and use them in your own community celebrations if you see fit, or in discussion groups, however you want to do that. So those are available to you. I now want to turn to the state representative from one of the state representatives from the 44th Legislative District, a longtime public servant, back to the early days of the Coast Guard. I don't think he was on a revenue cutter when they created the Coast Guard, but he's been around serving our community for a long, long time, and it's great to have John Lovick here on with us today. John, go ahead.
Excuse me. So it's close. You know, I know it's supposed to be serious, but it was close to the revenue cutter. So I joined 51 years ago. Sorry. Hey, Congressman Larsen, thanks for hosting this and thanks for inviting me. And I just want to tell you, Dr. Fenn, I could listen to you for hours. This has been great. The only thing I will add, and I'll just underscore something Dr. Fenn said, and that is that General Order Number 3 ended a dark and shameful chapter in our nation's history. I can't think of a darker chapter in our nation's history than slavery, selling people, ripping babies from the hands of mothers and selling them. So Juneteenth is very, very personal with me. I was born and raised in Louisiana, and I was raised by my grandmother, and her name was Elsie Holden Lovick, and her grandfather Thomas Holden, who was my great-great-grandfather, was born in 1863. And we found that he was probably born just before that. So he was, in essence, born a slave. And I met him many times growing up in Louisiana. And I just wanted to share with you that when I was attending a little tiny school in Louisiana, the name of the school was Allen High School for Negroes. And you can imagine a name like that. You can't scratch your head and imagine a school called Allen High School for Negroes. And I remember that the teachers would do everything they could to get my great-great-grandfather, Thomas Holden, to come out and speak to the classes because he had a rich history. I tell people that he was born a slave, and he was a slave even when he died, because the system that was in place, Douglas Blackman said it very, very well in his book, Slavery by Another Name. The system that was in place kept him a slave until he died in June of 1965. So I'm really glad to be here, and I look forward to the conversation. This is just absolutely wonderful. And I just want to add this. Juneteenth, for those of us who have experienced it, is not a sad day. It's a joyous occasion. It is a time to celebrate, and this is a time that we should be celebrating. I tell people this all the time, Congressman Larsen, when we used to talk to my great-great-grandfather about work in the fields. You know, they worked those fields standing, dragging those cotton sacks, chopping cotton 8, 10, 12 hours a day. No breaks, a short break for lunch, but that was what slavery was all about. So, like I said, General Order Number 3 ended a dark, dark, and shameful chapter in our nation's history. So thank you, Congressman Larsen, for inviting me, and thanks for hosting this event today. It's great to hear you, Dr. Fenn.
Thanks, Representative. And I'll have some questions for you a little bit later on the legislature and the actions there that you led. And I want to now turn to Lewis Harris, who's the first vice chair of NAACP Snohomish County. Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman Larsen. I really appreciate being here and representing the NAACP of Snohomish County. My name is Lewis Harris. I am the Vice President and Communications Chair of the Snohomish County chapter of the NAACP. I work hand in hand with the President, our Executive Committee, and the community to make sure that the rights of all people are upheld and that we are promoting the equality for all persons of color in the educational, economic, social, and political spheres in Snohomish County. We also work really hard to eliminate race-based hatred in Snohomish County. And, you know, we've been working the last 10 years to make sure that folks know what Juneteenth is. We've recognized the celebration and invited politicians, community leaders, organizations, businesses, and residents throughout Snohomish County to share in the celebration that Juneteenth is. We've done this by partnering with community organizations and also businesses to have a community barbecue where we talk about Juneteenth and we recite the Emancipation Proclamation, and a lot of times we have our Congressman Rick Larsen out to speak as well, and other politicians, and it's really a time of gathering and a time of celebration to look forward to the future from the history that we came from. And we're just excited as an organization that so many more people are becoming aware of Juneteenth, and that the state and the country is moving forward with recognizing the civil rights of all people. That's great.
Well, thanks, Liz, for being on, and I'll come back to you with a few questions to start. I've been to the picnics as well, but can you talk a little bit about what NAACP Snohomish County is doing, both to promote Juneteenth as well as specific other work that NAACP Snohomish County does?
Yeah, absolutely. So the NAACP of Snohomish County is one of the oldest civil rights organizations nationally, but in the county we've been in existence for a collective about 15 years, the latest iteration for the last 10. And we work really hard to respond to complaints of racism and advocate for equality and inclusion across the board in Snohomish County. With regards to Juneteenth, we've really made sure that the community knows that Juneteenth exists. And it's really interesting because it feels like we've been carrying the flag to let folks know what Juneteenth is. And now we're in this place where Juneteenth is a more widely recognized celebration. And I know Representative Lovick's going to talk about the progress that the state has made on that. And we're just really excited that that residents and elected officials know Juneteenth and are standing side by side with African American communities to celebrate the celebration that slavery is no longer acceptable. And so I mean, on top of that, we've been doing a lot of work to support our youth throughout the county in the educational sphere and professional sphere. We're working a lot with economic development right now and ensuring that minority-owned businesses have equal opportunity to resources and education to be successful throughout the county. We've also been doing work with organizations to create legislation and to ensure that the issues of African Americans are addressed, you know, across the governmental gamut, including the criminal justice system. And so, as you can imagine, we've been doing a lot, especially in light of the last year. So
yeah, great. Yeah, thanks. Well, it's a good segue to Representative Lovick talk a little bit about the state legislation that became law and maybe a little bit of the story behind the story on how that came to be.
Thank you, Congressman. You know, we've had this conversation for quite a while. Back in 2007, then Representative Jamie Peterson sponsored legislation to make it you called it earlier, a day of remembrance.
Yeah.
And there are times that you remember certain things, that members' testimonies, and I was Speaker Pro Tem of the House, and I will never forget the emotional testimony he gave, because he heard stories that, just like then Representative Hunt, they had not heard of Juneteenth. And so he made it a day of remembrance, and people came in and testified on it. And we even had bills sponsored a few years earlier. But this year, after what happened in 2020, I spoke with Representative Melody Morgan and asked if she was going to sponsor the bill. And she said she was going to sponsor it, and she asked me if I would co-sponsor it. Well, I truly didn't want to co-sponsor it. I wanted to be the prime sponsor of the bill. But you know how it works in this business.
Yeah,
you know, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. And knowing her, I knew that it was time to fold them because she was going to get it through. And so we worked on it. And when we sponsored the bill, actually, the support, I think we had 39 co-sponsors on the legislation. You don't see that too often. You normally have people say, I'll vote for it, but they don't take the time to co-sponsor it because it was time. I think someone said the other day, they said that 2020, the year 2020, opened all of our eyes to the injustices in our country, in our world. And I think having a year like 2020 opened our eyes to the injustices. And we were able to get the bill. It didn't sail through, but it passed. And the governor signed it. And we will be celebrating Juneteenth officially next June. We celebrate it every year. But we're going to officially celebrate it with the state holiday next year.
Yeah, that's great. And 39 co-sponsors, and there are 98 legislators in our state house. So
yes.
That is a big number. People say, why not all 98? You can never get 100% of folks to co-sponsor, but that's a big chunk of people.
And you know this yourself, and all of you know, it's not what you sponsor, it's what you vote for. And we had 89 people vote for the legislation in the House. That's pretty darn good.
And because it's public record, you can go online to see who those 89 were who voted for it.
Yep.
And who voted against it.
Yep.
By the way, nice background there, John Lovick with another guy named John Lewis, a former colleague and now passed away, but a good reminder that there's a lot of work left to do, including passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Got to get that done. So.
Same initials, by the way, Congressman. John R. Lewis, John R. Lovick. Just want to throw that out there.
Just a little thing. Right?
Yeah.
John Fenn, can you talk a little bit, you mentioned oral histories, and can you be a little more clear about what is an oral history and why that's important versus, like, you know, reading a history book? Okay.
Well, an oral history is a first-person recollection of lived experience, is the simplest way to put it. It's not necessarily about truth, as we learn much history isn't. It's about what they knew and what they felt and what they remember. And I think what's important about oral histories as tools of learning has come up already in a few comments made. I didn't learn about Juneteenth growing up in school. I didn't learn about it in formal education. Where we learn about these things are the community picnics, the celebrations, the family events that pass these stories along of Mr. Lovick's great-great-grandfather, right? I mean, that's where knowledge passes in really important ways, in informal manners. That's what folklore is all about. So gathering oral histories, gathering people's recollections is a way to augment, enhance, and sometimes correct the written historical record that ends up in textbooks that we get in our schools. And I think it's part of the long struggle for civil rights. It's part of the long struggle for equity and equality, is making sure that we're hearing the voices of people who were there, who knew about these things.
Do you have does the Library of Congress, do you have like a rubric if folks were listening in on this and watching this, say between now and Juneteenth or even after that? Do you have a rubric where someone says, you know what, I would like to tell the Library of Congress the story that I heard from my great-great-grandfather, and so that they don't have to call you, they can just maybe download here's how you do it, record it for us and send it in, or is that something that
there's one real quick way to do that. Maybe people are familiar with StoryCorps, which is a private nonprofit based out of New York City that has StoryCorps booths, as well as their StoryCorps Connect platform, which they dropped during in the beginning of COVID pandemic, as well as their phone app. The Library of Congress is in receipt of all the interviews that are given to StoryCorps. We are the permanent long-term storage of that material. So if you want to offer your story, your recollection of grandparents or great-grandparents, or even just siblings talking about what Juneteenth means to them right now in 2021, you could do that through StoryCorps, upload it through one of their platforms, and in due time, it will be processed and stored in the Library of Congress. It's not immediate, but we get all that stuff, and we take our stewardship of that very seriously, because this is the recollection of people who aren't writing books, right? They should be, why not? But they aren't. They're talking, they're having family conversations, and being able to document those and get those into part of the national historical and cultural record at the Library of Congress I'm all for it.
Yeah, and even like NAACP, Lewis could probably do their own history here in Snohomish County, or I just think we could next year, or the next time we get together for the Juneteenth picnic, maybe we could have the StoryCorps app there and just pull people aside and say, give us your 5 minutes. We're going to record your experiences for the library.
I think that would be a fantastic community event.
Agreed.
sorry, I'm sure you didn't come here to get an assignment, but
always looking for them.
I have a kind of a fun question for you, John Fenn, and I'll come back to Lewis and Representative Lovick. So you mentioned strawberry soda or something? Is that right? Yeah. Do you have like, what is the most common celebratory tradition or custom that you can think of through the Folklife Center's research on Juneteenth? And what is the most unusual one that you come across as well? And it could be like a celebration, or it could be the strawberry soda, or it could be.
Well, I think foodways are a big one, and that's the kind of documentation that has been given to us through a range of projects. I think maybe Mr. Harris mentioned one, sort of readings of the Emancipation Proclamation. That's a very common activity at Juneteenth celebrations across the country. Sort of going back to those words that then again, we recognize took a few years to reach many parts of the South to let people know, hey, this dark period is now over for y'all. We have some pretty interesting banners that were created by particular communities, and we have documentation of those. We don't have the banners themselves, but some very unique things, right, that depict what this community in this part of Texas or this part of Illinois, or what they do and how they visually depict their celebration of Juneteenth.
Yeah.
And again, I think the maybe not the most unusual, but the most valuable things are these oral history interviews we have with these folks who are recollecting their experience as enslaved peoples as youth, but they're recollecting 67 years later what that day was like for them. Like that, I mean, it's just so valuable and important.
John Lovick, I'd like to ask you more of a personal question. And having to do with your great-great-grandfather, and what, if you were to look back, what would you say that you learned from learning and hearing about his experience?
That's a great question. And I can't do it without getting a little bit emotional.
Sure.
Because I think he told me about his experience. What used to really, really get to me, Congressman Larsen, was how when we would walk down sidewalks in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and he would step off of the sidewalk and take his hat off and bow down like this as white people walk by. It used to just crush my heart to see him do that. I'm sorry.
No, please.
And then I got to tell you this. He told us, and he would share this story at our school, that we think he was born in 1860. He was perfectly healthy when he died in 1965. But I remember him telling us that his mom and dad were slaves when they were born, and they were slaves when they died. But what got to me, we would always look at him, and he was treated just like a slave every day. He was just treated like a slave, treated so poorly. And that was the part that used to just to get to me every step of the way. And they wanted us to learn from it and to do better, to stay in school, to get a good education. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thanks. That's, I think, important. Well, certainly, I'll say it's important for me to hear what the answer to that. And if you need to take a break, John Lovick, please.
I'm okay.
All right. So, Louis, what can Congress do, other than declare a legal holiday, a federal holiday, Juneteenth, a federal holiday? What should Congress be doing to address some of these issues, like John Lovick talked about, even though his great-great-grandfather, at the time he died, was not enslaved, but even as he lived, because of the system that was in place after the Civil War, during and after the Civil War, lived as an enslaved person. What do we need to be doing in Congress right now?
That is a huge question, and I'm glad you're asking me it. No, really, there's so much to do. The legacy of slavery is really a legacy of exclusion, unequal distribution of rights or exercising of those rights, and that has institutionally permeated the United States and the world for time immemorial, if you will. So looking at where we can go forward, a huge realm that I know a lot of advocates in the social justice realm and the NAACP nationally and locally, voting rights are huge. Any legislation that prevents people from freely exercising their ability to vote or giving access to the ability to vote is a direct continuation of that same ethos of slavery. Other areas in the criminal justice system, obviously, we know how the legacy of the police and the criminal justice system enforcing slavery and segregation and Jim Crow laws and the oppression of African American people. Creating accountability in that system is pivotal to really right the wrongs and move our country forward from that history in a real and meaningful way. But I mean, the issues go across the gamut, because slavery was a system that touched every part of an African American's life, and anybody who participated in that system, whether it's education, healthcare, housing, and I mean, transportation. There's just so many. There's so many things that our history was rooted in that our opportunity moving forward, Congressman Larsen, is righting those wrongs. And I know you hear about it because you have conversations with the NAACP and other community leaders, and you're very apprised of those issues and how we can solve them. So
Thanks. So I was just asking my staff to get ready to put another slide up. It's a Juneteenth events 2021, and NAACP Snohomish County is a part of this. So I'll just cue Joe from my office to put that slide up. Here it comes. So yeah, just the slide. There you go. Oops, back one again. There you go. Yeah. So this is a chart of Juneteenth events here in Snohomish County, starting with mine, I guess. It looks like on June 5th. And again, we'll be running this throughout. There's a rally, looks like tomorrow, with Black Lives Matter Snohomish County, and you can go and see there's quite a number of things happening that are specifically tied to celebrating Juneteenth here in Snohomish County. And this is brought to you by the Juneteenth Festival of Freedom. It's Snohomish County Black Heritage Committee, NAACP, the Communities of Color Coalition, and Community Transit are all part of this, as well as the Freedom Event folks as well. So you can see that some of these are virtual, and some of these are live as well. So. Just a heads up for folks, this is on the belovedforall.org website, and so I'll encourage folks to go to that website to get your own copy of this. So thanks, Joe, for putting that up.
Yeah. Do you mind if I say a couple words about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so historically, the NAACP has been one of the organizations that hosts Juneteenth events. There's also several other organizations, but the NAACP has been a community-led one. And going forward, now that the Washington State has created a state observance, we are collaborating with other African-American-led organizations and BIPOC organizations to create a unified Juneteenth event. And we're going to have the first event this year, but due to COVID and its impacts on our community, we decided to hold off and plan for next year. But we did want to create the unified Juneteenth flyer that we saw. And so it really highlights all of the organizations throughout the county and all of the Juneteenth recognitions and happenings, so that everybody throughout the county has an opportunity to learn about Juneteenth and can take part in this celebration when it's convenient for them in a way that they're comfortable with. And so definitely would like to suggest anybody who's watching this within the district or outside, take part. Juneteenth is for everyone, and it's a celebration of American history.
Do you think, Louis, if you get the go-ahead, even though maybe not on Juneteenth, you'll have the picnic, but if we get the go-ahead, would you reschedule the picnic for later in the summer, maybe, or you thought about that? I'm not looking for another picnic to go to, but I will go and eat if I have to, if I'm absolutely required.
Well, the food will be good, right? No, I'm just kidding. But, Juneteenth, interestingly enough, it's June 19th is Juneteenth, right? Yeah, and right, so it's really difficult to kind of postpone that celebration for a different time. But we're using the month of Juneteenth to celebrate it this year. And in the future, be on the lookout. We will definitely make a good Juneteenth barbecue where you can come and eat.
That's great, yeah. John Fenn, this does beg a question. You saw virtual events and live events and so on a whole month. How has Juneteenth celebration changed? Are there themes about how it's changed over the last, since it was first celebrated?
I think they've become, this kind of, we have documentation of, or understanding that Juneteenth events have been happening basically since 1866 in various capacities, right? So 1 year after the historical event happens, people did use it as a day of remembrance. I think what then started to become important is they became community events, as we've heard about, where people were getting together to celebrate and remember both the end of slavery, but also the building of new communities, right? Not always in the easiest manners, not always with the full support of the dominant society or the economic systems, but with the support of themselves. So they became events about recognition and self-empowerment and understanding of the value of family, but also extended family, you know, the larger meaning of family, a family of shared experience, shared trauma, shared structural oppression, but also shared celebration, music, food, that kind of stuff. So I think that's been just growing over the years. I mean, I think, you know, I'm trying to think of what the earliest documentation we have of Juneteenth events, and I was talking about this with Dr. Sybil Moses yesterday, because she's a specialist in Black parades. That's kind of one of her specialties, and so she has some documentation. She can find stuff in the library sort of back to the 1950s and 60s, whether we have a single photo here or something like that. But we know these things have been going on, and now again, in the age of everyone can document themselves, we're able to see it more. So there's I think to a point Mr. Harris made, there's more of an opportunity for awareness now, right? And so the events maybe not have changed, but more people are feeling that there can be part of it too, which I think is really important.
Yeah. Did you, so, you know, last year and this year is the pandemic, and of course we can't get to the end here without mentioning the pandemic. Maybe one day we won't have to, but last year, was there a drop off? I'm sure there was somewhat of a drop off because we couldn't do live events, but are you documenting sort of shift to more online, or did you see that last year?
Specifically with Juneteenth events, I think there was a significant shift to online. You know, everyone was Zoom and everything, unfortunately. I mean, you know, I think now, hopefully with the availability of vaccines and the decrease in rates, you know, people are feeling more comfortable getting together for family celebrations. I would really hope that would be the case this year, that people are able to do that and feel safe doing that. And, you know, I think just, you know, at the library, as you mentioned earlier, you know, we've been working from home for the whole year. I'm anxious. I know it looks like I'm in the library, but I'm not. I'm anxious to get back, right? We've had to share everything online, and we like having people. We like seeing people and helping people learn about cultural heritage and events just like this, celebrations like this. So yeah. I'm hoping that shift overall will benefit everyone.
Well, I'm a big fan of Library of Congress, and as I said before we went live, I was telling you the biggest news of last week was that the Library of Congress began bringing back, allowing researchers to come back into the reading rooms. There's probably bigger news, but probably not in the library.
It was big news for us.
Yeah. I'll just give it, you know, we'll wrap up here. Maybe we'll start with John Lovick. Anything you want to add, John?
You know, other than to say that this is wonderful, like I said earlier, Congressman, it's a joyous day. It's a day to celebrate. One of the things that I'm really glad that I get to serve on a group, it's a Juneteenth planning committee, and we are planning. These are people from all over the state, a group from the Mariners, and we're planning a lot of activities as we lead up to June 19th. And one of the things that one of the guys, I think it was one of the representatives from the Mariners, is suggesting that, you know, people find a way to go out and patronize a Black-owned business if they can. Even if you go to a place, like we have a place called Black Coffee Northwest in Shoreline. Even if you go in, take a few people in and buy a couple of cups of coffee and things like that. Do things to let them know that you appreciate them being in the community and help support their business. So that's what I'll say. But mainly, I just want to thank you for this. This is just wonderful. I'm looking forward to more activities. And I know with respect to you, Congressman Larsen, you don't just wait for one thing to happen. You show up at everything. And I've seen you over at the park there around Silver Lake. I've seen you at a lot of events, and glad to see that you're continuing your great legacy of supporting events like this.
Oh, well, thanks so much for saying that. I appreciate that. Lewis Harris.
Oh, you know, I just want to echo that sentiment. You know, it's you have been really consistent. I have to tip my hat to you, Congressman Rick Larsen. You know, we're very keen in our community about politicians supporting us when it's convenient for them. And you have consistently shown that you're here for us. And so you've been to every Juneteenth, I think, for the last 6 years that I've been organizing them. So we certainly appreciate that. And I do want to, pay homage to what Representative Lovick said. The Black community has gone through a lot throughout history, and we're just seeing that we can balance those scales. And so, but it takes everyone to do that. And so, everyone from every walk of life, we all have a shared history in the United States, and we should all be celebrating it as we move forward together.
John Fenn from Library of Congress.
I just really quickly want to point out that the American Folklife Center was launched by an act of Congress in 1976, the American Folklife Preservation Act that charged us with preserving and presenting folklife in the United States in all its diversity. So to pick up on something Mr. Harris mentioned, like, that's what we do. So take the opportunity to learn about that diversity of heritage and experience and cultural traditions. Also, I just want to give a shout out to my colleagues at the Center for Washington Cultural Traditions, which is your state folklife office based in Washington Humanities Council. Dr. Langston Colin Wilkins, good colleague of mine, as a director there. They do great work and help you all document your own traditions.
That's great. That's great. Well, behind me is a few things. The Library of Congress, the Voices Remembering Slavery at the Library of Congress. And it's just www.loc.gov. And then actually you can poke around on the website and go anywhere, but the Voices Remembering Slavery link is there. HB 1016 is the bill that became the law to establish Juneteenth as a legal holiday here in our state. And then NAACP Snohomish County's website is up. It's just NAACP-SnoCo.org. So just some resources for folks to use. I will note, folks, that we kept recording. We had a little problem with the Facebook Live part of this. It may have come back, but it is recorded, and this will be up on my website very soon, and we'll get it distributed around, and we'll keep distributing it. In fact, like for Lewis, if you want to get a link specifically for NAACP to use, we'll just do whatever we can to get the word out on this. This has been really enlightening for me, educational for me as well. I think members of Congress, believe it or not, we don't know everything. As I say, that I'm not an expert on anything. I'm a member of Congress. It's a 180-degree difference between that, and by listening to experts, I can get smarter about things. And so I really appreciate the expert panelists helping us all out today to help us understand Juneteenth and to help us take the first step this month in celebrating Juneteenth 2021. So thanks all very much for coming on and helping out.
Peace, patience, kindness, everybody. This is great.
Thanks. Stay well, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy Juneteenth.